After catching Jacob kissing my roommate, I decisively broke up with him. His friends placed bets on how long it would take before I came crawling back in tears. Even Jacob casually joined in. I bet she won't last more than a month. The next day, Jacob strutted in with my roommate, proudly showing off in front of me. What he didn't know was, I had truly moved on. For 3 whole months, I never once reached out to him. When we met again, I had already made my relationship with his best friend official. Jacob completely panicked. Chapter 1. The club announced a group dinner. As soon as I pushed open the private room door, I was met with a blinding scene. Jacob had his arm around my roommate, Zoe, grinning as he made an announcement. Jacob. Who's this? Jacob chuckled lazily. Your sister-in-law. What about Freya? Hearing my name, I finally stepped fully into the room. All eyes instantly turned to me. Jacob met my gaze with ease, raising an eyebrow. What does she have to do with anything? My real girlfriend now is Zoe. It hadn't even been 24 hours since we broke up. Zoe's face turned an appropriate shade of red as she shyly hid behind Jacob. Subtle, almost pitying glances landed on me, sharp enough to pierce through my skin. I hadn't expected Jacob to be here. Freya, why aren't you sitting down? Are you upset because I'm here? Zoe, never one to miss a good drama, added fuel to the fire. He looked at me with amusement. If you can't stand it, you can leave. The club president stepped in, trying to smooth things over, but I stopped him. I nodded, my hand clenched tightly inside my pocket just to maintain composure. You're right, I don't need to stay here. It's way too toxic. Ignoring the stares, I turned and walked out, but I hadn't made it far before Jacob caught up with me. He looked at me with an entertained smile, laughing softly. Jealous? I didn't answer, only struggling to free myself from his grip. Jacob pinned me against the wall, his fingers brushing against the corner of my eye. About to cry from how upset you are, I finally found an opening and broke free, looking past his shoulder, straight at Zoe, who stood frozen, her face pale. Control your boyfriend, I said coldly. Don't let him go around making people sick. Chapter 2. This time, Jacob didn't chase after me. About 5 minutes after I left, I suddenly remembered I had left my bag inside. I had no choice but to go back. Laughter erupted from inside the private room, spilling through the door. I don't think Freya looks like she's over him. Why'd they even break up? I froze in place. Jacob let out a meaningless chuckle. She was being dramatic. His friends started egging him on. I bet she'll definitely go back to Jacob. Wanna bet? I say a week. I'll go with 2 months. Jacob's voice was particularly clear at that moment, slow and casual. I bet she won't last more than a month. I stood there like an auction item on display, pinned in place, unable to even push the door open. Then, a low scoff came from behind me. Coward. The moment I turned around, the guy behind me reached past and pushed the door open. Romeo, Jacob's so-called best friend. Romeo, why are you so late? Someone asked. He ignored them all, grabbed my bag, and before I could react, took my hand and led me out. Thanks. I rarely spoke so politely to Romeo. Ever since I started dating Jacob, he had always been vaguely hostile toward me. This was the first time he had ever helped me like this. You broke up? He glanced at me. That's when I realized I was still holding his hand. I quickly pulled away, nodding awkwardly. Jacob's call came in at that moment. Where are you going with Romeo? Jacob had always been nonchalant, never serious about anything, but right now, his voice was unsettlingly cold. It's late. Instead of going back to your dorm, you're out with another guy. What exactly are you planning to do? All the frustration from the night boiled over. Without thinking, I shot back. Whatever you and Zoe did, that's what I'll be doing with Romeo. Then I hung up, not giving him the chance to mock me. Silence wrapped around me like a suffocating force, pulling me back to reality. Romeo leaned against the wall, watching me with half-lidded eyes. His tone was amused. So, what exactly are we going to do? I suddenly wanted to slam my head against the pavement. This was even more embarrassing than hearing Jacob's bet. Romeo didn't seem to care about my mortification. He tilted his head slightly, gesturing behind me. One's a 6-star hotel, the other's a themed one. Which do you prefer? There was a trace of laughter in his voice. Something proper, or something immersive? I squeezed my eyes shut, resigned to my fate, and desperately changed the topic. I'll treat you to dinner instead. Thanks for getting me out of there. Romeo let out a soft chuckle and accepted the excuse. But in the end, we didn't go for dinner. Midway, I dragged Romeo into a bar. You planning to drink over that bastard? Romeo leaned against the bar, looking unimpressed. I shook my head. I just feel like tonight is full of awkward moments that I can't process. Let alcohol numb it a little. Saying that, I lifted my glass and downed a large gulp of beer. Maybe I was already a little tipsy. Recklessly, I insisted Romeo drink with me. He chose something much stronger than mine. Alcohol really does lower inhibitions. Late at night, on the empty streets, I tugged at Romeo's sleeve and pointed at a pink neon sign across the road. It read themed in bold letters. What kind of themes do they have? Was it like the Doraemon exhibition I saw in Japan 2 years ago? Or maybe some glittery Barbie-themed event? I thought about it seriously for a moment before politely making a request. Can you take me to check it out? As soon as I spoke, my hand was grabbed. Romeo played with my palm, his tone intrigued. Are you just messing around because you're drunk? I shook my head. I'm serious. I had never realized that when I was drunk. My words actually became more structured. Romeo, take me there. His dark gaze locked onto mine. After a long pause, he stepped closer, eyes deep and unreadable. And what if you don't own up to this tomorrow? Romeo was so petty. Was he really worried I wouldn't pay for the tickets? Unfortunately, my phone was dead, so I couldn't transfer him the money now. I could only make a firm promise. I absolutely won't go back on my word. It almost looked like he was recording me. Then he put his phone away and took another step toward me. His fingers brushed against my cheek. His voice was hoarse. Would you refuse? Instinctively, I leaned into his touch. His hand was warm and dry. It felt nice. I couldn't help but squint slightly in comfort. I like it. The last bit of restraint in Romeo snapped. He took my hand, lacing our fingers together, and walked in. The receptionist hesitated. We don't have any prepared. Would you two need some? I blinked in confusion. Huh? Romeo paused for a moment, not looking back. He gently squeezed my fingers, his voice even lower. Send them up. Chapter 3. In some ways, this experience was eerily similar to a roller coaster ride. I sat there, feeling the unpredictable shifts in speed, the sudden bursts, the slow lulls. Some parts of the track were even bumpy, forcing me to grip onto anything I could hold. At times, my mind drifted to literary passages I had studied in school. For example, the flower bud, battered by wind and rain, barely clung to life, a granary filled to the brim, with the family smiling as they waved their hands. This is enough. Any more, and the barn won't hold. Fragments of memories overlapped and intertwined in my mind. The last one was from my childhood at my grandmother's house. A fire broke out in the hills behind her home. The raging flames were finally subdued by a sudden downpour. Romeo, like a track star breaking the finish line, crossed over effortlessly. He chuckled, breathless, extinguished. The worst thing in the world is waking up hungover without blacking out. At dawn, as the sky barely began to brighten, I fled. My phone was still dead. When I reached the dorm building, I saw Jacob standing there. Dew clung to his shoulders, suggesting he had been there for quite some time. Where were you? His tone was flat, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. I tried to walk past him. It's none of your business. Jacob caught my wrist with the hand holding his cigarette, the ember dangerously close. Are you insane, Jacob? I waited here for you all night, and you never came back. Your phone was off the whole time. Jacob stepped closer. Freya, you better not tell me something actually happened between you and Romeo. His eyes held the stormy edge of someone about to break. I felt an instinctive sense of dread. Stepping back. Don't push me to lose it, he warned, suddenly laughing, a chilling, hollow sound. I'll kill you both. Piece of shit. I snapped, finding it almost laughable. You cheated. I dumped you. And now you think you can control who I see? but it was as if he wasn't even listening. Just as he took another step forward, the dorm supervisor came out to hang laundry. She pulled me inside before he could do anything. At the entrance, we ran into Zoe. She didn't look like she had just come downstairs. "You must be feeling so proud," she murmured, her eyes rimmed with red. My head was pounding, and I struggled to keep up. "What? What's the point, Freya?" she continued, as if talking to herself. "Jacob himself admitted I'm his girlfriend. He humiliated you right in front of everyone for me. In his heart, you're nothing. So don't overthink things." I leaned against the wall, ignoring the ache in my lower back. Without much thought, I muttered, "You and Jacob are both nothing to me." I didn't have time for this. I needed a shower. Without waiting for her response, I went straight to my dorm. I didn't notice the way her gaze darkened as she watched me leave. I had barely escaped Jacob, and the moment I turned my phone on in my dorm, Romeo's call came through. Instinctively, I declined. Immediately, a message popped up. "Romeo, I stared at my phone, hands shaking slightly. 2 seconds later, "Romeo, Freya, you're good." A bad feeling crept up my spine. Sure enough, that night, as I walked out of the library, Romeo was waiting at the entrance. A cigarette rested between his lips as he tilted his head, smirking at me. "Freya, come here, time to settle the score." The night air had turned frigid, but even colder was the tone in Romeo's voice. Chapter 4. I really don't need you to take responsibility. I took a deep breath, pulling Romeo into a secluded corner and assuring him it was just an accident. He let out a cold chuckle, lazily undoing the buttons of his shirt. My composure cracked little by little. "There won't be a second time," I hurriedly whispered a reminder. "And we're outside." Romeo shot me an uninterested glance before tapping the exposed skin near his collarbone. "Did I say I was taking responsibility? Freya, I'm here to make you take responsibility." A clear red mark stood out on his skin. As if that wasn't enough, Romeo kept pressing. I was a first-timer. Like hell he was the only one. "You're unbelievable." I shut my eyes for a moment, trying to digest the absurdity of being called a player by a guy. When I opened them again, Romeo had neatly buttoned his shirt back up. He watched me with cold amusement as I cautiously apologized. "All right. I'm sorry." "How do you want me to take responsibility?" I sighed, rubbing my temple. "I just think I don't like you, and you don't like me. There's no need to be tied down because of this." Something in my words seemed to trigger him. Romeo stared at me, unblinking. His gaze made my skin prickle before he finally spoke in a flat tone. "Suit yourself." With that, he straightened and walked past me. Under the dim night sky, his silhouette carried an unexpected loneliness. A twinge of guilt crept into my chest. After that, Romeo and I returned to being strangers. Even when we crossed paths, he didn't spare me a glance, like nothing had ever happened. Jacob, on the other hand, had started acting unhinged again. Judging by Romeo's attitude, nothing really happened between you two that night. He toyed with his lighter, slouching lazily in his chair. "Freya, you know he's picky. You're not his type. In terms of your options, I'm your best choice." I sighed, thoroughly annoyed by his presence in a class he wasn't even supposed to be in. "And? Is that your excuse for cheating?" Jacob flicked his lighter shut, his patience thinning. "I only kissed her. And you broke up with me. Don't you think you overreacted?" I nodded, playing along with his logic. "Then if we get back together, I can go around kissing other guys too?" A loud thud echoed as a textbook slammed onto the desk. Jacob's voice dropped into a low warning. "Try it and see what happens." It was an elective class, and most students were glued to their phones, paying no attention to us in this tucked-away corner. Jacob's hand gripped my shoulder, keeping me from dodging. His eyes locked onto the lower half of my face. "Kissing random guys? Freya, how much lower can you sink?" His grip dug into my shoulder, making me wince. Before I could respond, his movements grew sharp enough to draw the professor's attention. "You two, what's going on?" Jacob shot me a long, unreadable look before letting go. I stumbled back, hitting the chalk-stained wall, unfazed. He stood up, flashing the professor a casual grin. Sorry, wrong classroom. Then he pushed back his chair and walked out. But that wasn't the end of my troubles. After class, I realized Zoe had also been sitting in the lecture. I hadn't noticed her presence in the crowded room. For once, she didn't cause a scene, but as she walked past me, she let out a mocking laugh. Freya, you're keeping things messy with Jacob. How is that any different from being a side chick? I barely paid her any mind until I noticed what she was holding behind her back. Zoe seemed guilty, quickening her pace, but I had already seen it. It was just her phone, so why was she hiding it? I realized Zoe had an agenda that day while I was at my part-time job. The cat cafe I worked at had launched a new event. The owner asked us to stand outside and hand out flyers. By sheer bad luck, I handed one to Romeo. I was in a short-sleeved dress with a black and pink cat ear headband. As per the cafe's uniform, a black satin choker hugged my neck. Sorry, wrong person. I pressed my lips together, reaching to take the flyer back. I can't go? Romeo's gaze slid from my cat ears to my choker before finally taking the flyer. No, that's not what I meant. Since I had already given out all the flyers, I had no choice but to lead the way inside. I tried to keep a low profile, but Romeo wouldn't let me. Aren't you going to introduce the event? His expression was unreadable, making it hard to gauge his mood. I forced a polite smile and began explaining. It's mostly about playing with the cats. You can also DIY a cat toy and take free photo prints with them. You can try it alone or bring a friend to make crafts together. Romeo suddenly stopped in his tracks. He tilted his head, his dark eyes unreadable. So what if I only want to do it with you? My brain short-circuited like an atomic bomb had just gone off. I stood there, frozen, feeling my face heat up at an alarming rate. Romeo smirked for the first time in ages, reaching out to flick one of my cat ears. His tone was leisurely. What? Your cat cafe doesn't offer assistance with making crafts? I blinked rapidly, snapping out of it. Oh, of course we do. Lowering my head, I quickly led the way inside. The temperature today seemed unusually high. I raised a hand to my face, fanning myself in an attempt to cool down. Chapter 5. Helping Romeo make a cat teaser wasn't as easy as I thought. Mostly because every time I bent down, I had to be careful about the length of my skirt. Romeo noticed quickly. He got up and was about to offer me his chair when, "You looking for trouble?" I blinked in confusion and followed his gaze. A guy was standing behind me, pretending to be casual, but his arm was just inches away from my skirt. What the hell? The guy acted innocent, scoffing. I didn't even touch her. It's just a little close, right? Romeo smiled lightly. Yeah, you're right. Before the guy could react, a thin bamboo stick, meant for making the cat teaser, was pressed right in front of his eye. Just a little close. Huh? One of them was paralyzed with fear. The other was completely at ease. The difference was obvious. Romeo. I called his name softly. He didn't move the stick an inch, just glanced at me with an unreadable expression. Let's hear it. Saint Freya, what do you have to say? He thought I was going to plead for the creep? I quickly proved him wrong. You're aiming at the wrong place. I grabbed his hand and guided it downward along the guy's shirt. What are you doing? I stopped at a very specific spot. Satisfied, I nodded. Stab here. Romeo chuckled. All right. He pressed forward slightly. Holy sh. Wait. Stop. The guy was trapped against the wall with nowhere to run. I'm sorry. I swear. I never touched your girlfriend. Aw. The classic mistaken girlfriend moment. I opened my mouth to correct him, but Romeo beat me to it. He twirled the stick idly before retracting it. I know. Otherwise. Do you think I'd let you off with just a warning? The guy let out 2 awkward laughs before scurrying away. Thanks. I had just started to breathe easy when Romeo suddenly strode off in another direction. Hand it over. I followed and saw Zoe, half hidden under a cap and a face mask. She kept her head down, not moving. Romeo impatiently tapped his fingers against the table. You want to take it out yourself, or should I do it for you? Zoe clutched her chest. You're really going to touch a girl in public? You want me to call this harassment? Romeo scoffed. I don't care if you're a guy or a girl. He moved to reach for it. Zoe stood her ground. In the end, I was the one who grabbed it from her. A phone. I was just filming the cats. You're overreacting. Romeo nodded toward the surveillance cameras at the entrance. You recorded for at least 10 minutes. And from this angle, barely any cats passed by. I looked down at the phone, then back at Zoe, who was starting to panic. Her behavior in the dorm lately suddenly made sense. Besides blasting her phone on speaker while talking to Jacob, she was always walking around with it, making sure it happened to pass by me. I pulled Romeo aside and faced Zoe directly. Unlock it yourself, or I'll call the cops. Don't call the police. Zoe didn't unlock her phone. Instead, she started rambling. Freya, I didn't mean anything bad. I stared at her, unimpressed. I just thought you looked pretty, so I saved a few photos. She cracked under the pressure and unlocked it with trembling hands. I scrolled through her album. Almost all the pictures were of me. There was one from earlier when that creep nearly brushed against me, one from our dorm where I was in my nightgown, and even one where I was only wearing a thin camisole. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Freya, I'll delete them all right now. Ignoring her apology, I handed the case to the police. Later, the officers showed us a chat log. Zoe, Jacob's birthday is coming up. I want to get him a watch, but I don't have enough money. Unknown, isn't your dorm mate the beauty of your department? Just take some sneaky pics and sell them. Quick cash. Zero effort. Zoe, honestly, I don't even think she's that pretty, but I'll take your advice. The female officer reassured me. Don't worry. She didn't get a chance to spread them, but I didn't feel relieved. Only sick to my stomach. Anger overpowered my reason. I stepped forward and slapped Zoe across the face. You talk shit about me while profiting off my pictures? Zoe, do you enjoy playing the victim? That's when Jacob walked in. The officer, who looked young and still a bit naive, made a half-hearted attempt to stop me. She gave Zoe a glare before leaving. Jacob shoved me aside the moment the officer was gone. Are you insane? I nearly fell, but Romeo caught me just in time. Jacob, control your girlfriend first. He handed me the phone. Check if there's anything left. As Romeo explained the situation to Jacob, I carefully went through Zoe's phone. Romeo had deleted everything. I tossed the phone back to her. She stared at me the entire time. After paying her fine, she stopped me as we left the station. Wait. Her eyes darted between Romeo and me. There was a picture, just Freya's back in a camisole. You can't even tell it's her. But Romeo deleted it immediately. The air grew tense. I can't think of any reason for that. Zoe's lips curled into a smirk. Unless he's seen Freya in that camisole before. Jacob caught on instantly. His gaze turned ice cold, like something from a horror film. Explain. I noticed Romeo shifting, about to step in front of me. He always did that. Always stood in front of me in moments like these. A thought wavered in my mind. Maybe Romeo wasn't just defending me out of responsibility. There's nothing to explain. This time, I spoke before Romeo could. Zoe gasped, eyes lighting up in mock realization. So after Romeo took you that night, you never came back to the dorm. Jacob clenched his fists so hard his knuckles cracked. Yeah. Romeo turned to look at me, surprised. But what does that have to do with you? And what does it have to do with either of you? Jacob's presence alone turned the air frigid. Freya, you're really asking for it. He stepped toward me, but Romeo blocked him with an arm. You should really think twice before doing something reckless. Romeo. Jacob gritted his teeth. You knew Freya was my girlfriend, and you still touched her? You call yourself my brother? Girlfriend? Romeo gave him a bored glance. She hasn't been yours for a while now. Jacob redirected his anger at Romeo. I quickly stepped in front of him. I was drunk. I forced Romeo. Silence. Romeo stopped moving. He just stared at me, visibly thrown off. Chapter 6. Before the three of them could fully process the implications of my statement, my ride-hailing car arrived. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed Romeo's arm and pulled him into the car as fast as I could. Jacob seems to have some serious mental issues. We should probably keep our distance. Romeo's gaze dropped to our intertwined hands. All right. I immediately let go. Sorry. I dragged you into this when it has nothing to do with you. That camisole was brand new. I had only bought it a few days ago. Romeo had probably deleted the picture on impulse. Leaning against the car window, he replied in an even tone. It looked a lot like the one you wore that night. I thought it was the same one. I was unwillingly pulled back into the memory. I answered offhandedly. Really? I don't remember. Romeo was the kind of person who lacked the ability to read the room. Ignoring my clear discomfort, he continued in his unhurried manner. I remember every detail of that night. I stared out the window, contemplating the car's speed. For a second, I genuinely considered jumping out. As if that wasn't enough, Romeo glanced at me again and added, "After all, it was my first time." I hastily turned on my phone. It's getting late. The dorm will be locking up soon. Driver, could you please speed up? While speaking, I subtly shifted away, putting as much distance between us as possible. Romeo let out a soft, mocking laugh at my awkward attempt to change the subject. But thankfully, he let it slide. To thank Romeo for all his heroics today, I decided to grant him unlimited free visits to the cat cafe. He did not have the false modesty to refuse. He accepted it smoothly. The moment I arrived at the dorm entrance, an unfamiliar number called. Freya. After I blocked his old number, Jacob had switched to a new one. He took a deep breath, as if struggling to keep his temper in check. You said it was just an accident because you were drunk. Fine. I believe you. As long as you promise never to see Romeo again. He paused, as if making a great concession. I can forgive you. I'll even pretend we never broke up. Jacob was truly a delusional psycho with no moral compass. If you don't understand human language, go to hell. I was about to hang up. Freya, I'm at a hotel with Zoe. If you say you don't want this to happen, I won't let it. I let out a bored "oh. Hope you two have a wonderful firstborn." Then I promptly ended the call and blocked the number again. Standing at the dorm entrance, an odd thought crossed my mind. That bet. A month had already passed. Jacob lost. Not only had I never once reached out to him, but my mind had been entirely occupied by someone else. Romeo. Sarcastic Romeo. Distant Romeo. Romeo. Looking quietly disappointed when I rejected him. And Romeo. Pressing me down and kissing me. Utterly satisfied. I thought. What I felt for him hovered near the borders of affection. But just having feelings wasn't enough of a reason to tie Romeo to me with that one night. Not unless I was absolutely sure. I couldn't risk ending up with another Jacob. Chapter 7. The Cat Cafe event ran for an extended period, which meant that during my shifts, I had to wear my uniform, complete with cat ears, and face Romeo every single day. Romeo, can't you just learn to do it yourself? I sighed, contemplating the unpredictable twists of life. I can't keep teaching you. I have other work, like handing out flyers. Romeo casually squeezed the cotton ball in his hand before tossing it to me. Then, without a word, he picked up his phone and walked to the front desk. When he returned, he took the cotton ball back from my hand. Your boss said that from now on, whenever I come here, you can stop whatever you're doing and teach me. Why? I asked, curling up in the small chair and looking up at him. Romeo reached over and flicked my cat ear headband again. I got a membership card, a VIP card. He had generously loaded it with 10,000 yuan. The owner now treated him like royalty. So, what's the next step? Romeo held the ridiculously pink, sparkly cat teaser. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. Romeo noticed my stare and set the toy down. What? Are you courting me? I felt a little awkward but couldn't think of a more subtle way to phrase it. Romeo responded with an indifferent mmh. Eyes lowered as if none of this really mattered. I fidgeted with my fingers, nerves making me stutter slightly. But I already told you, you don't have to take responsibility for that night. You really don't have to. Romeo picked up another stick and resumed his crafting, his tone carrying a hint of exhaustion. This isn't about that night. While applying glue, he added casually, I liked you from the start. At that moment, I was immensely grateful that my cat ears were fake. Otherwise, like a real cat, they'd be standing straight up and turning bright pink. The warm golden light bathed his eyelashes. My mind replayed his words over and over again. The world around me went silent. For the first time, I clearly heard the sound of my heart racing. Just as I was hesitating, debating whether to respond to Romeo so soon, something unexpected made the decision for me. My period was 2 weeks late. The memory of that moment from that night resurfaced in my mind. Romeo's voice, slightly ragged. "We're out, Freya." And me, drunk and delirious, holding on to him, moving recklessly. "What are you talking about?" Like a roller coaster that suddenly malfunctioned, stopping midair. I had pleaded with the imaginary ride operator, begging them not to stop my roller coaster. The operator had sighed but relented, saying, "Freya, you better take responsibility for this." But after that, I had bolted and forgotten about it completely. Now, clinging to a sliver of hope, I bought a pregnancy test. When I saw the 2 bright red lines, dizziness washed over me. My temples throbbed. My fingers instinctively opened Romeo's chat, but I couldn't type a single word. This wasn't something I could say over text. I pressed a hand to my stomach. For my cafe uniform, I deliberately wore an extra jacket today. Anxiously, I waited for Romeo, but when I finally saw him, the words stuck in my throat. I stood at the entrance, watching a scene unfold in the distance. A ridiculously cute girl was chatting with some guy, all smiles and laughter. Romeo's expression was icy. He marched over, pulled the girl to his side, said something to the guy, and then dragged her away. Classic jealousy. The girl didn't seem to mind, happily skipping alongside him, clinging to his arm. My emotions, already on edge, spiraled. My vision blurred with tears. Scumbags shouldn't get to have children. I sniffled, already picturing myself lying on an operating table, preparing to get rid of his child. What's wrong? The scumbag I was cursing suddenly appeared in front of me. Oh, and he had her with him. The girl blinked, her long fake lashes fluttering. "Aw, why is this little one crying?" I froze. That voice, that ridiculously deep voice. The shock nearly made me miscarry on the spot. Romeo, unimpressed, grabbed the girl by the throat. "If you come out dressed like this to scam people again, I'll strip you naked and dump you in the street." In the next second, a long, sleek black wig was dramatically flung in my direction. I stiffly shifted my gaze to the girl's face. "Hee, surprised you, huh?" The man cleared his throat. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. "I'm Romeo's roommate, 100% straight. But that doesn't stop me from being a gorgeous woman. Oh, and by the way, I remember you. Last year's campus beauty contest, you came in 3rd. I was 1 place ahead of you." I was still processing this when Romeo kicked him out. Romeo turned back to me. "So, why were you crying?" He returned to the topic with terrifying precision. My mind was an absolute mess. One moment, I was imagining Romeo asking me to marry him for the baby. The next, I was picturing myself alone, going through the procedure. Amid the chaos, I grasped onto the one common factor in both scenarios. "I'm pregnant." The words left my lips in a dazed murmur. I stood there, frozen, blurting it out directly to Romeo. Chapter 8. In the end, neither of the scenarios I had imagined came true. Romeo drove me to get checked. The result? A complete mess. The pregnancy test had been wrong. The doctor, ever so kind, patted my shoulder reassuringly. "It's all right, dear. You're still young. You'll have plenty of chances to get pregnant in the future." I didn't want to talk. As if things couldn't get any worse, someone took a photo of me and Romeo walking out of the obstetrics clinic and anonymously posted it on the school forum. When my friends told me, my first instinct was panic. I thought I'd be publicly shamed. But when I opened the post, I realized the original poster was deliberately guiding the narrative to make Romeo look like the guilty one. Damn, this is Romeo we're talking about. No way, right? The girl didn't even like him. He must have forced her. Stop caping for good-looking guys. Being hot doesn't mean he can't be trash. Not every girl is into him. Y'all act like he's irresistible. I bet he took her to the hospital to force an abortion. The post had already been up for hours. There was no way Romeo hadn't seen it, and I knew exactly why he hadn't defended himself. So, I made a verified account and reposted the thread. My boyfriend took me for a routine checkup. The original poster deliberately twisted the story to slander him and violated our privacy. I've already reported this to the police. There was only one person who could have done this. Jacob. Rather than waste time arguing with him, I'd rather let the authorities handle it. Not even 2 minutes after I hit send, Romeo called. Even though he was the one who called, he was completely silent when I answered. I let out a slow sigh. Romeo, why don't you ever defend yourself when people talk shit about you? Are you some kind of doormat? His tone remained indifferent. The post wasn't wrong. Taking a girl to a pregnancy checkup without even being official, getting scolded for it is fair. I was exasperated at his stubbornness. Did you not see my post? I thought about it and decided. I still want to take responsibility for you. His voice was calm, detached. But forget it, Freya. If it's just for responsibility, then forget it. Forcing you like this is meaningless. I had no words. He was so dramatic. I felt like I was coaxing a fragile princess. Romeo, I want to take responsibility for you because I like you. Are you happy now? There was a 2-second pause. Where are you? 5 minutes after I told him my location, Romeo ran to me. Do you really like me? His lips were pressed together tightly, eyes searching mine. That's when I realized my casual way of confessing had only made him more insecure. So, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around his waist, burying my face in his hoodie. Sincerely and gently, I reassured him. Yes, I really like you. Only you. You're my favorite person. The next second, I was pulled into a tight embrace. The warmth between us grew, until a cold voice shattered the moment. What about me, Jacob, the undead plague of my life? Annoyed, I peeled myself out of Romeo's arms. For once, Jacob wasn't raging. His voice was soft, almost fragile. I broke up with Zoe a long time ago. Nothing ever happened between us. But Freya, you don't care at all, do you? So that's why Zoe had come back crying one night. Why she moved dorms. Why she requested a transfer to another major. The class rep had even gossiped about it, imitating the professor's voice. With your grades, a retake year would suit you better than a transfer. I slowly refocused on Jacob. He stood in the wind, looking thin. You even knew I was the one who made that post. But you wouldn't even call me. His voice wavered. Freya, I don't understand. How did we end up like this? How annoying. If you don't understand, then just die. I had zero patience for his theatrics. I grabbed my nice-smelling boyfriend and got the hell out of there. At least you don't have to share a dorm with that psycho. I whispered in relief. Chapter 9. Why did you bring me here? I had dragged Romeo to the most secluded spot on campus, a tiny, almost forgotten park. Because Jacob won't find us here. He's got a terrible sense of direction. I don't even think he knows this place exists. Romeo's eyes glimmered with amusement. His voice, husky and deep, carried a teasing edge. So, he won't find us. And then? What exactly do you want to do? Under the heat of his gaze, I couldn't hold my ground. I dove into his arms again. I didn't hug you enough earlier. I nuzzled against his hoodie, inhaling the crisp, clean scent that clung to him. Let me hold you a little longer. Romeo's hand gently cradled the back of my head, absent-mindedly running his fingers through my hair. His tone was slow, deliberate. Just a hug? I lifted my head from his chest. Are you asking for a kiss? Romeo gave a composed mmh. I hesitated. Won't someone see us? Without a word, he lifted me by the waist and turned me around. Not anymore. This spot was already quiet and deserted. I stood on my tiptoes and gave him a quick peck. All right then, Romeo, you can kiss me. He chuckled softly, rubbing my ear before leaning down to claim my lips. I followed his rhythm, meeting him with equal fervor. Our chemistry was ridiculously in sync. Though, that wasn't the only way we matched. One day, after spending the entire afternoon wandering around town, we happened to pass a newly opened themed hotel. Romeo came to a stop. His expression was impossible to read as he looked at me. Want to try something new? Driven by curiosity and the spirit of scientific exploration, I followed him inside. I already knew. A new round of roller coaster rides was about to begin.